Welcome to EmpowerME Podcast, empowering talented individuals since 2020. EmpowerMe is designed with you in mind, your goals, your challenges, your opportunities to grow and to prosper, all for you. We bring the topics in discussion, and you bring the desire and commitment to succeed. Now, on to the show.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the EmpowerME Podcast, where we talk today about resumes, the part they play, and the importance of one. But let me just get right to it. This episode's different. We're excited to introduce a special guest for today's EmpowerME Podcast episode, Mr. Greg Zimba. You know, Greg has amassed years of leadership, hiring, and recruiting experience within his career. Greg, I want to welcome you to the podcast, my friend. Give us a better introduction than what I just did. Talk a little bit about where you come from and really what we're going to talk about today.
Well, thanks for the positive introduction. I appreciate that. My background has been varied, I guess relating to looking at resumes and actually being part of the hiring process. Started back when I worked for MBA America in the banking industry. Had an opportunity to see a lot of professional resumes and a lot of different skill set expectations. Moved on to here to T-Mobile, where I came in as a coach. I worked as a trainer for a number of years. I was a team manager for 5 years or so. And then I moved on, did a little bit of expanding my background and accepted a position with Northern Lights Healthcare. So I had an opportunity to see medical recruiting, which was specialized in some areas and also high volume in others. And then why we're talking right now, I returned here as the Oakland recruiter in 2018.
That's fantastic. And I know, honestly, to those folks that are dialing in, this is why I really was excited for this episode. What I've been really looking forward to is that depth and the range of what you've seen out there, Greg. I think that makes you such an intriguing and interesting person to kind of come in and talk to the EmpowerMe team around the aspects of going through a career path where resumes need to come into play. Let me just briefly talk about, what I feel is one of the most critical sections of the EmpowerMe program, and in my opinion, the most mysterious. And that's the section we've lovingly entitled Resume. Why do I need a resume? Thank you. I worked on that. So I want to delve into this topic with you and take more than a couple of minutes from our normal podcast length and see if we can discover additional insights involved with resumes and the overall role they play in our careers. So in preparation, I went to the trusty Google, and as a result of my search, I found what I will call a fun fact. Would you be surprised to know that the resume's origin traces back to Leonardo da Vinci?
That's interesting. I did not know that.
1842, to really kind of put a little sauce on that. Leonardo da Vinci, 1842, as legend has it, he sent a letter to the regent of Milan. So I'm assuming this is a pretty powerful cat in the time, in the location. And the letter simply stated he was looking for a job. But this is considered the first resume on record. I mean, how's that hit you?
That's impressive, and I'm putting that in my pocket for a story that I can sound like I discovered.
It's a great meeting opening line.
It really is.
We're going to test it out in our comment section in the podcast. But the reason why it kind of resonates with me, and so here will be the first question I'd like to put to you, Greg, is when we think about today and the rapid pace at which the workforce is existing, the degree of technology that's out there, quite frankly, does the resume still hold up, or has it faded somewhat? What's your take on that?
No, the resume is absolutely held up. It is, if anything, I'd say even more essential because the job market is even that much more competitive than it's been in a very long time. So from a standpoint of structure, organization, background, experience for both yourself as the individual who the resume represents, as well as for your target audience, your hopeful future employer, yes, it is absolutely as important as ever.
Okay, I got it. So we know it's still important. Can you go maybe give me a couple layers into what you just shared, and can you tell us why employers care about that resume?
Okay, yeah, absolutely. There's a number of things, but I'd say off the top, resumes are just an extension of your application. And it's important to know, are you qualified to do the job? And that resume is truly, that's one of the key things I look at when I look at a resume, is does the person have the qualifications that I know my hiring manager is seeking to ensure that this person will be the best candidate to hit the ground running when they come into a position based on education, based on certifications, based on work experience. That's what I look for, and I'd say on the surface, that's the key of why I'm looking at a resume.
Right, so the employer's like, hey, the relationship that they're relying on you is just kind of take a look at this batch of this field of applicants and kind of start this filter process, if you will. And the only way you make that determination is what has been shared with you through the resume, most likely.
Yeah, basically for most of my hiring managers, what I do is I do an intake form, meaning that they'll let me know through an interview that I'll do with them, basically about the position and what they're looking for. Provide me all the details that they want me to screen in or out. So if they say we need somebody with 2 years of Excel, if we need somebody with 5 years of people management, somebody that has experience in as a nurse practitioner, whatever the case may be, those hiring managers are not going to see any resume that doesn't meet those qualifications they've already sent me, because that's my job as a recruiter, is to screen in and out the most qualified candidates or the least qualified candidates.
Fair enough. So, gotcha. And so for me, and thanks again for sharing those insights, but that gives us, in my mind, great clarity on why a resume plays such a vital role. It's that first look, set of eyes on you as a candidate. If we could, let me shift us to kind of from the why to maybe a what perspective in some of the questions I'd like to ask you. What advice would you offer to our EmpowerME folks who may not yet have started to create a resume? Where should they start?
Yeah, I would very much start like I would, maybe an old school book report, right? Do an outline. Just kind of walk chronologically through your work history. Now, again, keep in mind, and I think we'll talk a little bit more about this later, but resumes should be specific to the job that you're going for. So I think it's important, though, in order to understand what skills and experiences you want to highlight, to see them all on paper. So really, it's making a list. What have you accomplished? Have there been awards, recognitions that you've earned? Have there been classes of maybe some courses that you've taken that could be applicable really to any job? And then once you go to move forward with your resume, start crossing out the things that maybe don't apply for the position that you're interested in and highlighting the things that do, and then you have your foundation of what you can build your resume on.
Okay. I mean, actually, I don't know if I even gave that much consideration. I think my brain said I have to start very formal, have a template, but I like what you're saying is really just grab a sheet of paper and start long listing your work experience, your education. Is that fair enough?
Yeah.
Things like that. So I really think that makes a lot of sense to me. My curiosity is kind of taking me still further in here, but I'm thinking about, all right, as I'm making a resume, I know that everyone has an opinion, oftentimes. What, if I could ask you, what are some popular myths or misconceptions people have about what goes into a resume?
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, if you try to go online to figure out what best resume to use, it's like authors. You're gonna have a different voice. You're gonna have thousands of options basically, and it's really not gonna help you a whole lot. So, to share what I'll tell you is, don't worry about the artistic flair and nature and format and font and photographs and personalization. No recruiter out there really cares about that. Maybe the person that might be doing the hiring manager may, right? Because it may strike a chord with them on something that they're related to or something that they're interested if you both haven't read the same book or something along those lines. But what I'll tell you is what truly matters is, does your skill set and your experience speak to you being successful in the role that you're applying to, and forget about allowing yourself to get distracted by all the frills.
I like that. So I like the focal point that you brought in here, but let me kind of do a quick PID check on what you just shared, because I think, I want to make sure we don't create confusion, because there's something very clear about what you shared. So we talked about, first and foremost, be straightforward, maybe concise. Don't worry about additional things such as artwork or pictures. And then you made a clarification point. You said recruiters aren't looking for that, maybe the hiring manager. So I would want to put this out there, and I want you to check me. If you're out in an environment where you are submitting an application where there is no knowledge of who you are, that most likely then that process will involve the first line of filtering, which is a recruiter. And so then what you want to do is have the things that recruiter has been directed to look for. But you may find yourself in an organization or a company or a team in where you're a known person, and you know that is going to kind of go kind of as a step over, if you may, a recruiter. And then it may be a plausible piece to then really personalize your resume, but only in the case where you're kind of going over that first broad search into a more localized piece. So what I'm saying is to my listeners and to you, Greg, is if I'm applying for a job for the other side of the company I work for on the West Coast and they've never seen me, I'm going to have a very straightforward resume that captures who I am in alignment with the job I want. But if I want to give a resume to the vice president of the region with whom I've had interactions, I will take the time then to consider differentiating my resume in some manner to show my effort and desire for the position.
Yeah, I think you've got that down, Pat. What I will say, though, I guess, to clarify, and I appreciate you bringing that back around, there's always going to be a place on a resume to put activities and interests, right? Like maybe a place that you volunteer to show that you have a partnership within your community. And maybe that does fall into that you have a hobby of photography. Like some of those things can appear on a resume, but should be very much the last thing they see, because none of that matters if you're not qualified to do the job. That's just allowing you to put some of your personality in. Go online sometime and look at examples of egregious resumes, and you will see what looks like a collage of home photos, pictures of children, artwork. It's distracting. And it's a beautiful work of art, but
doesn't serve the purpose.
Doesn't serve the purpose.
I got you.
So you can personalize it, but as long as you keep it as straight and direct as you did everything else that you just described.
Fantastic. So we're talking about construct. We're talking about long listing on a rough draft, and then the construct of between a straightforward resume and maybe something artfully crafted. Is there a principle involved about how much detail or amount of information to include on a standard resume?
I mean, there is, again, depending on the role, is going to be whether you are going to be required to maybe give more description. You need to understand, though, the people that you're interviewing with, they understand as much, if not more, than you do about what's required. So you don't need to over-explain. So I would say keep things short, bullet points. If there's a specific example, a project, and you need to give some context, that's fine. But really, I highly recommend save the conversations for the interview. Don't try to put them on a piece of paper. It'll save you a lot of space, and you still have that in your back pocket to bring out when you're sitting across the table from your prospective hiring manager.
That makes so much sense. And I think for a lot of us, when we start this process of creating our resume, we can get kind of overwhelmed. So I just like, again, the simplicity of the approach that you've shared and reminding us to kind of be concise but get your point across. Listen, Greg, I want to thank you so much for coming on and answering the questions that I've put forward to you. And I know that Team EmpowerME appreciates those insights that you provide as much as the contributions you make to the overall program. But if I could ask one more question.
Sure.
What would you like to leave us with when it comes to this overall topic of resumes?
again, for me, what I tend to describe for the reason to build a resume, sometimes it's as much for yourself in preparation for the interview that you're going to be getting next, because it's helping you organize your thoughts and your experiences so that when you're going into that interview to be able to tell a story, you're not off track. You have a basis of why you're there. You've got the highlights that's in front of both yourself and the hiring team, and it allows you to walk through so you're not nervously trying to think of examples. You've already got them down on paper. It's an interview preparation guide for you, and it's an insight into your background and experience for them.
Fantastic. So this is all the time we have for this episode. And again, Greg, thank you so much. I will tell you this, and I'm talking to Greg, but I'm really talking to everybody that's dialed in and loaded in and uploaded in. Resumes doesn't need to be a mystery, but it is something that requires a little practice, multiple approaches, and, to be fair, partnerships and working with folks. So here's what I want to tell those folks that have dialed in. For you guys that are in the EmpowerME program, it's the next topic that we'll review. And Greg is going to host this show, and so it's going to come with a lot of rich insight, the ability to practice with your own resume. Look for it in your inbox in the coming week, where we're going to send you a couple of templates. We want you to take a shot at least beginning to fill out your resume, then attend the review session and ask and fire away the questions. There's no better person to field those questions to than our own Greg Zimba. And with that, guys, I'm going to wrap our show up today. This has been a really great conversation. I like the fact that we had a guest on here. I'm going to explore more of that in our future podcast episodes. I'll close like we always close here. We want you to keep pushing, keep moving. We believe in you. Love you. Have a great day.
We hope you've enjoyed this podcast from the EmpowerMe team. If so, please like and provide comments with any feedback you'd like to share regarding your take on the subject. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to the Oaktown EmpowerMe channel today. Thanks for joining us, and check back in the future for discussions regarding your growth and development.